So to follow several previous speakers' examples, I'm going to start by speaking a little bit Chinese, which is 我叫齐丽丽. Chinese and English names are the same, so it's easy to remember. I was born and raised in Shanghai, so 我是上海人. 我是马里兰州众议员，今天非常高兴和大家在一起。So I want to first start by introducing myself. I'm Delegate Lily Chi, who is from the Maryland House of Delegates, and I'm so thrilled to be joined by my great colleague, Dr. Chow Wu, who also is a Maryland State Delegate. You know, I like to say there are only 3 Chinese Americans from mainland China at the state legislative level, and Maryland has 2 of them. So give us some credit. We doubled our representation. That's right. And I proudly represent Montgomery County, Maryland, which is a community of 1 million people with 15% Asian Americans. We are the fastest growing community, and we are increasingly powerful through every election. But more than being an American politician, I'm here as a Chinese immigrant. So today, the commemoration of the repeal of the 80th anniversary of the repeal of the Chinese Exclusion Act has special meaning to someone like me, because I am the kind of people that the Exclusion Act intended to target about 140 years ago. So before I came to America, I looked at the Chinese in America with deep envy, because they seem to have it all. And I thought, you know, as long as I could reach American shore, the roads will be paved with gold. That was what I had imagined what life would be like for Chinese in America. But beyond the economic opportunities, many of us were drawn to this piece of land because of that ideal and that promise that everyone is created equal, and that regardless of your last name or who you are and where you came from or what language you speak, you will be judged by the content of your character. As a student of English, I was so impressed and empowered by Dr. Martin Luther King's speech, I actually ventured to recite the whole speech as a way of learning English, as a way of feeling like I connected to America and that dream of being an American. Like many immigrants, I entirely bought into the notion that as long as we play by the rules, America is our promised land. But of course, the reality is far less rosy. Living in America showed me a very different picture. Despite their tremendous successes and accomplishments in many aspects of American life, I realized that Chinese and Asian Americans are largely on the margins of the American power structure and missing from leadership ranks, even in fields where they are supposed to be overrepresented. So I took upon myself to learn what it means to be a minority in America, because I was not one, and to learn what it means to be Asian in America, because I was not one when I grew up in China. I learned about Wong Kim Ark. I learned about Vincent Chin, which, by the way, the murder of Vincent Chin took place 100 years after the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. And of course, the Chinese Exclusion Act, the Transcontinental Railroad, the Japanese internment camp, and about the model minority myth and the perpetual foreigner stereotype. From learning about Asian American history and other minorities' histories, I realized that as a very small minority in America, it would be dangerous for Asian Americans to not pay attention to politics. So that was why I decided to get involved, and in the process encouraged many others, mostly immigrants and Asians, to get involved in local affairs by voting, serving, and giving locally. And eventually, I decided to run for office myself. At the time of my election, I had no idea that I would be the first state legislator in America to have grown up from the People's Republic of China. As I like to say, Only in America can you run for office and get elected by people who can't even pronounce your last name. But even as a state legislator, I was not immune from the bigotry and the xenophobia. One of my colleagues from the other party, let me just say from the other party, used the words like central planning, crony capitalism, and communist when we were discussing one of my bills on the floor to grow Maryland manufacturing. What does that have to do with central planning and a communist? If my last name was not Chi, I ventured he would never have said that. That was totally racist. So I called him out. Friends, we live at a time when those who decry identity politics are using identity politics to stoke fear against minorities and immigrants. Let's not be used against other people. The past few years taught us that history does repeat itself, unfortunately. This is not an easy time for being Chinese in America, and all of you know that. The anti-Chinese and anti-China sentiment has been easily translated into anti-Chinese American sentiment, and it's reflected in everything we can see. It has deeply affected the morale of many Chinese living in America. In my conversations with many friends in science, technology, academics, and entrepreneur innovation fields, many are on the edge and are deeply concerned about the fate of our future in this country. Even at the state level, we are fighting the battle now, as restrictive land use laws are being introduced state after state, even in progressive Maryland. Because I was there when that bill was introduced. This is why we must be vigilant, because xenophobia is still very much alive, and it only took an invisible virus to rear its ugly head. Next year's election is not something we can afford to sit out on. We must act like our future depends on it and our livelihood depends on it, because it does. So please donate, volunteer, vote, and repeat, and bring others along. Or run for office yourself, because people like us don't have to wait a generation to be real Americans. And immigrants don't have to just play by the rules. We can also help set the rules. Don't you agree? And let me be very clear. Immigrants are not diluting the American culture. We are not diminishing the American cultures and values, because we are America. We built America. We make America stronger and more competitive, because this is our country, a country made of outsiders. So I want to thank all of you for being here, for being part of the empowerment, for what you do to lift Asian American voices.